Let's bring in our next guest here. We got Dan Schorr. Dan's former criminal prosecutor, both in the city as well as also in Westchester, also managing director at Kroll, and also a professor at Fordham Law. And there's a lot of different perspectives on this, but I want you to put your hat back on as a prosecutor. You, in fact, had some cases that you prosecuted where there was police and civilian tragedies involved. Pat Lynch said at the beginning that if there's doubt, the benefit of the doubt always has to go to the cop because of a fluid situation that he said took 8 seconds. What is the expectation we should have of a police officer? And given all the particulars, we're talking about loose cigarettes, we're not talking about a guy who attacked the cops, resisted arrest here, but we all saw the video, what happened after that. Legally and practically, what's the expectation you guys and prosecution officers would have had of police?
Well, as a member of the Homicide Investigations Bureau in the Queens DA's office, we investigated any death that occurred in police custody or with any interaction with the police, and we would investigate it independently, usually by presenting it to a grand jury. You want an independent, objective look at the evidence. We need to know the medical examiner's finding. We need to talk with everyone there. The video is also important. The officers are innocent until proven guilty, and they will only be guilty if they are proven beyond a reasonable doubt to be guilty in a criminal charge. However, there's also departmental charges. There's probably going to be a civil suit. So there's different levels of culpability and different burdens of proof for those different forums.
Well, you hear from the family, and Dominic got from the community. They just don't want these guys to lose their badges. They want somebody to see the inside of a jail. To that end, when does this become criminal? It looked to the naked eye, and I'm not a cop or an expert, it sure looked like a chokehold. The mayor and the police commissioner even said it looked to them like a chokehold. When does that then cross over that it's not just a violation of police procedure and protocol, but it's gone criminal?
It's heartbreaking listening to the family. There's two real issues that will be relevant to criminal charges. One is it a justifiable use of force? Is the force that was used justified in order to obtain the arrest? And then causation. Did what they did in terms of the possible chokehold, which it looks like on the video they were using, but that has to be confirmed, did that lead to his death? And we'll hear what the medical examiner has to say about that. So those are two big factors, justification and causation for criminal charges, and that has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. As I said, the civil suit is just preponderance of the evidence. Is it more likely than not that they used unjustifiable force, and there's different standards for departmental charges for them to lose their jobs?
Let's talk about pressures, and you've been there for this, whether it be for a borough DA's office or even for the mayor's office and the police commissioner. You heard the family. They made it loud and clear. The father said this wouldn't have happened to a white boy. So race is going to be certainly an issue as this thing plays out. Talk about the pressures behind the scene, from the DA down to the ADAs and the prosecutors, from the mayor's office or from Police Plaza. Talk about all the moving parts that goes on in a case like this that the public doesn't get to see.
There's always going to be public pressure when there's a high-profile case, and this is a big example of that. And you can't be a successful district attorney if you can't stop the public pressure from influencing your decision. You need to have an objective look at the evidence. That doesn't mean you're detached to what's going on and to the crime that might have happened. You care about it. You want to stop incidents where people are killed in police custody in a way that's not justified. But you have to look at the evidence in an objective way, present it to the grand jury, and you want to really canvass everyone who is there, analyze the video, get as much information as you can so the DA can determine whether there should be charges and the grand jury can make an objective view about whether there's criminal charges.
Does it also, though, is there a part of a DA, and I'm not, you don't have to name names here, but do you say, now because the feds can get involved, that I almost get a pass as a DA? If I can't find compelling evidence, I know there's going to be a civil trial. The guys aren't going to be, they'll either be reassigned or they're not going to be, they're going to lose their badges or something, but the feds will get involved on the civil rights aspect of it. I don't have to do everything from my office.
I don't think so, and that shouldn't be the case. There's concurrent jurisdiction where the U.S. attorney can look into this, but this is primarily a role of the district attorney. Someone died in police custody, and it's up to the DA of that county to investigate it and determine whether there should be criminal charges. For them to just say the U.S. attorney is going to look into it would be giving up their duty that they're sworn to protect the citizens of the county. So I doubt that I will be surprised if this is not presented to a grand jury.
Quick legal question, and you're not the prosecutor on this case, so I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Pat Lynch just gave us the legal strategy tonight. These officers, if they are criminally indicted and charged, they will argue clearly, as Pat Lynch just said, that this is not a chokehold. The video shows us different. So if you're the prosecutor in this case, how would you establish your evidence on this? Obviously, the medical examiner's report, in which that's inconclusive as of right now, but solely on the issue of the chokehold, what do you do?
Well, the video evidence is part of that. You'll have expert testimony testify about what is a chokehold, what's not, how you actually cut off the oxygen to somebody, so the grand jury can understand that, and if it goes to a trial, ultimately a jury. This is a tragic case. No one should die in police custody, but these police officers are innocent until proven guilty, just like any criminal is. Even a mass murderer, they're innocent until proven guilty. So the facts have to come out. The video is certainly very upsetting, and it's heartbreaking to hear from the family, but the investigation has to go forth.
And I want to remind everybody here who we have at the table, because they can speak to this from interesting perspectives. Dan is former criminal prosecutor, again, specializing in cases of domestic violence and sexual assaults. And you're also involved in an organization we've profiled in this program, Hope Store, an amazing group providing services to victims of domestic abuse. And also Assembly member Shelley Mayer, who has sponsored a number of bills dealing with sexual assaults. Let me deal with rape kits in a second. For the victim to show the courage to consent with all the challenges that they deal with, and to go through that and to find justice so elusive in many ways, in a different way, albeit, but it's a victimization twice here. I mean, you hear that woman's horrible story, and the least we should do is to do everything we can to try and catch her perpetrator, right?
Absolutely. And the saddest part of her very courageous testimony to me is you put your faith in law enforcement. You've been victimized by this person. You go to a hospital, which is viewed as a caring environment. You consent to this, and you believe in your heart of hearts that the police are in it for the right reason and will do the right thing. And to really be betrayed by the criminal justice system, even more than the perpetrator in some ways, it's such an offensive affront to our ideas that we have a system that works. This is a system that does not work.
No. Dan, you've been intimately involved in this. And I should say, it's gotten better in New York. There's a lot of places in the country that are way behind. New York City particularly has made improvements. But this is a dollars and cents issue. But again, put the face. The victim has enough courage to come forward here. A lot don't, right? They come forward and they consent to a very probing and invasive procedure. They assume that that kit is getting processed. They're matching it up with databases. Talk about the calculations that go on, whether or not to even process the rape kit.
It's unbelievable that there's this backlog. Detroit, for example, found in an evidence room over 11,000 rape kits back in 2009, and some of them were a decade old or older. They started going through them, and they've identified almost 100 serial rapists from going through the rape kit, where you could identify semen, hair, saliva, other DNA evidence.
Sitting there.
Yes.
And these guys could have reoffended in the meantime, victimized someone else.
And I think it's really important what you talked about how invasive and uncomfortable this process is. And when I was trying rape cases, I would often explain that to the jury, because the defense would sometimes say that the victim was making up the accusation. And I would really stress, look what they had to go through. Not only if they supposedly made it up, they voluntarily went through this horrible process of being probed by all these swabs and by a strange person sitting in a strange room, being asked all sorts of questions about your personal sexual experience. It's such a tough process to go through.
Right after you're raped.
Exactly. And I would argue to the jury that, that corroborates the truth of what most of these victims are saying, is that they were sexually assaulted again and again. And by matching up DNA, you might not be able to identify the person who attacked this particular woman, but maybe the DNA matches DNA from another case where they did identify the perpetrator. And then you could link them and you could say, okay, this person's responsible for multiple sexual attacks. And that's how you build a case and you prosecute and take people off the street and lock them away.
And before I run out of time, again, the presumption from the victim, she articulated is, I figured they were processing it. The statute of limitation concerns, you don't get this guy in 10 years, it compromises a case. But more than that, the feds have finally made some money available, but it becomes, I would imagine, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. Who's got more money, who doesn't have more money appropriated that'll determine whether or not you have a better or worse chance to catch the perpetrator. And you're putting police in the position to say, she might have been drunk, it'll be a hard case to prove. Or, you know what, she knew the assailant, that's going to be a hard one. That's not the way it's supposed to work.
But Richard, here is where it is so important that there's leadership at the local police level. And I see this in the city of Yonkers and in the other communities. The department, whether they have the resources, they may not have the resources. And then they got to go and fight for the resources. It's not an excuse to say we don't have the resources. Leadership requires, when the going gets tough, you don't have the resources to process it, you got to have like a sit down with your mayor that says, we are absolutely must have this, and we're going to go to war to get this.
That's where you use the media.
That is what leadership is about. There's absolutely inexcusable that there's not resources.
We've got 15 seconds left. I'll give you the last word.
Well, this is a public safety issue because when these are not tested, not only is the trust of that victim violated, but also that offender is out there to offend again and again and sexually assault other people. So this is a major public safety issue. Fortunately, there's been a lot of private and public dollars trying to alleviate and deal with the backlog, but still a long way to go.
And honestly, it's a national shame if we don't fix this. Dan, Assemblywoman, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. See you Monday at 6 p.m.